Hi. Uh, Welcome everybody to another session in the Viswa Pragna channel. And today we are continuing our reading of the book Sophie's World by Jostein Gaarder. Uh, this is session number 24. Maybe we'll have another 10-15 sessions before we complete this book, and we are trying to take it slow and easy. It's a very nice Sunday morning here, Sunday evening, I'm sure, in India. And we have Sikshardin Garu with us who has joined the panel. So, Sikshardin Garu, welcome.
So thank you, sir. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And hello, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, Sikshardin Garu. We have a comment here that says Mortal Creature Garu is asking, what is it about, sir? Sir, we have been doing reading of this book called Sophie's World. Okay. It's an English book and it is Western Philosophy 101. So it tracks the history of Western philosophy, starting all the way from the Greeks and the Romans and the pre-industrial revolution era, all the way to the industrial revolution. And there are many topics that are introduced in a very simple manner, as if teaching a teenage girl, right, in the Nordic countries, basically. So if you sit through one of the readings or if you watch the previous readings, you will understand what it is. So it is purely Western philosophy 101 introduction through the lens of the author, Jostein Gaarder. So we finished Hegel last week. So Sikshakare, am I audible well enough? Decently enough?
Yeah. Good, sir. Good.
Good.
No problem.
Okay, wonderful. So let me then get into another very interesting chapter in this book. It is titled Kierkegaard, basically. It's Kierkegaard. So these two A's, right? When you write guard or grad or whatever it is, it's all the same thing. It's a very common name that you see in the Nordics, right? So whenever you see these two A's juxtaposed next to each other, usually you can sort of guess where they are from, right? So Norway, Denmark, Sweden, the Nordics, basically, right? So with that said, Kierkegaard, Europe is on the road to bankruptcy. That's the headline for this chapter. Hilda looked at her watch. It was already past 4 o'clock. She laid the ring binder on her desk and ran downstairs to the kitchen. She had to get down to the boathouse before her mother got tired of waiting for her. She glanced at the brass mirror as she passed. She quietly put the kettle on for tea and fixed some sandwiches. She made up her mind to play a few tricks on her father. Hilda was beginning to feel more and more allied with Sophie and Alberto. Her plan would start when he got to Copenhagen. Copenhagen being the capital of Denmark, basically. In the Nordic, the D stands for Denmark. She went down to the boathouse with a large tray. Here is our brunch, she said. Her mother was holding a block wrapped in sandpaper. She pushed a stray lock of hair back from her forehead. There was sand in her hair too. Let's drop dinner, then. They sat down outside the dock and began to eat. When is dad when is dad arriving? Asked Hilda after a while. On Saturday. I thought you knew that, her mom said. But what time? Didn't you say he was changing planes in Copenhagen? That's right. Her mother took a bite of her sandwich. He gets to Copenhagen at about 5. The plane to Christianland leaves at a quarter to 8. He'll probably land at Javik at 9:30. So he has a few hours at Castro. Yes, why? That's what her mom said. Nothing, I was just wondering, said Hilda. When Hilda thought a suitable interval had elapsed, she said casually, have you heard from Anne and Ole lately? Right? Or Ole or Ole, whatever. Annie and Ole. Anne and Ole. They call from time to time. They're coming home on vacation sometime in July. That's what the mom said. Not before, said Sophie. No, I don't think so. So they'll be in Copenhagen this week? Why all these questions, Hilda? Asked her mom. No reason, just small talk. You mentioned Copenhagen twice. I did. So Hilda herself is surprised. We talked about dad touching down in. That's probably why I thought of Anne and Owen. As soon as I finished eating, Hilda collected the mugs and plates on the tray. I have to get on with my reading, Mom. I guess you must, said her mom. Was there a touch of reproach in her voice? They had talked about fixing up the boat together before Dad came home. Dad almost made me promise to finish the book before he got home. It's a little crazy. When he's away, he doesn't have to order us around back home. That's true. I get ordered the same way, by the way, and certain people are not around. If you only knew how much he orders people around, said Hilda enigmatically, and you can't imagine how much he enjoys it. She returned to her room and went on reading. So here is where the real chapter of Kierkegaard starts. We don't wish to be disturbed. Actually, let me just give the link if anybody wants to come and join. Just give me 1 second here before we start the real reading. All right. Okay. So the real chapter on Kierkegaard starts from the book or the binder. Suddenly, Sophie heard a knock on the door. So from the Hilda world, we are now transformed to Sophie's world. Suddenly, Sophie heard a knock on the door. Alberto looked at her severely. We don't wish to be disturbed. The knocking became louder. I'm going to tell you about a Danish philosopher who was infuriated by Hegel's philosophy, said Alberto. The knocking on the door grew so violent that the whole door shook. It's the major, of course, sending some phantasm to see whether we swallow the bait, said Alberto. It costs him no effort at all. Phantasm is what? Phantasm is some kind of a dream or some kind of a very strong emotion, right? So the word that is usually used is called phantasmagoria. Phantasmagoria means the intensity of a strong emotion or a dream, basically. But if we don't open the door and see who it is, it won't cost him any effort to tear the whole place down either. You might have a point there. We'd better open the door then. That's what Alberto is saying. They went to the door. Since the knocking had been so forceful, Sophie expected to see a very large person. But standing on the front step was a little girl with long fair hair, wearing a blue dress. She had a small bottle in each hand. One bottle was red and the other was blue. Hi, said Sophie. Who are you? My name is Alice, said the girl, curtsying shyly. Huh? I thought so, said Albert, nodding. It's Alice in Wonderland. How did she find her way to us? Asked Sophie. Alice explained. Wonderland is a completely borderless country. That means the Wonderland is everywhere, rather like the United Nations. It should be an honorary member of the UN. Yeah, we already have one like that. It's called Kailasa. It should be an honorary member of the United Nations. We should have representatives on all committees because the United Nations also arose out of people's wonder. Aha, hence the Wonderland. Huh? That's major, muttered Alberto. And what brings you here? Asked Sophie. I am to give Sophie these little philosophy bottles. She handed the bottles to Sophie. There was red liquid in one and blue in the other. The label on the red bottle read drink me, and on the blue one, the label read drink me too. So two drink me's basically. The next second, a white rabbit came hurrying past the cabin. It walked upright on two legs and was dressed in a waistcoat and jacket. Just in front of the cabin, it took a pocket watch out of its waistcoat pocket and said, oh dear, I shall be too late. Then it ran on. Alice began to run after it. Just before she ran into the woods, she curtsied and said, now it's starting again. Say hello to Dina and the Queen, Sophie called after her. Alberto and Sophie remained standing on the front step, examining the bottles. Drink me and drink me too, read Sophie. I don't know if I dare. They might be poisonous. Alberto merely shrugged his shoulders. They came from the major, and everything that comes from the major is purely in the mind. It's only pretend juice. That's what Alberto said. Sophie took the cap off the red bottle and put it cautiously to her lips. The juice had a strangely sweet taste. But that wasn't all. As she drank, something started to happen to her surroundings. It felt as if the lake and the woods and the cabin all merged into one. Soon it seemed that everything she saw was one person, and that person was Sophie herself. Haha, interesting. She glanced up at Alberto, but he too seemed to be part of Sophie's soul. Curiouser and curiouser, she said. Everything looks like it did before, but now it's all one thing. I feel as if everything is one thought. Alberto nodded, but it seemed to Sophie that it was she nodding to herself. It is pantheism or idealism, he said. It is the romantics' world spirit. They experienced everything as one big ego. It is also Hegel, who was critical of the individual and who saw everything as the expression of the one and only one world reason. So Sophie is asking now, should I drink from the other bottle too? It said so on the label. That's what Alberto said. Sophie took the cap off the blue bottle and took a large gulp. This juice tasted fresher and sharper than the other. Again, everything around her changed suddenly. Instantly, the effects of the red bottle disappeared and everything slid back to its normal place. Alberto was Alberto, the trees were back in the woods, and the water looked like a lake again. But it only lasted for a second because things went on sliding away from each other. The woods were no longer woods, and every little tree now seemed like a world in itself. The tiniest twig was like a fairy tale world about which 1,000 stories could be told, right? The little lake suddenly became a boundless ocean, not in depth or breadth, but in its glittering detail and the intricate patterns of its waves. Sophie felt she might spend a lifetime staring at this water, and to her dying day, it would still remain an unfathomable mystery. She looked up at the crown of a tree. Three little sparrows were engrossed in a curious game. Was it hide and seek? Sophie had known in a way that there were birds in this tree, even after she had drunk from the red bottle, but she had not really seen them properly. The red juice had erased all contrasts and all individual differences. Sophie jumped down from the large flat stone step they were standing on and bent over to look at the grass. There she discovered another new world, like a deep sea diver opening his eyes underwater for the first time. Amongst the twigs and straws of grass, the moss was teeming with tiny details. Sophie watched a spider make its way over the moss, sure-footed and purposeful. A red plant louse running up and down a blade of grass, and a whole army of ants laboring in a united effort in the grass. But each tiny ant moved its legs in its own particular manner. Most curious of all was the sight that met her eyes when she stood up again and looked at Alberto, still standing on the front step of the cabin. In Alberto, she now saw a wondrous person. He was like a being from another planet or an enchanted figure out of a fairy tale. At the same time, she experienced herself in a completely new way as a unique individual. She was more than just a human being, a 15-year-old girl. She was Sophie Amundsen, and only she was that. So a unique entity, basically. What do you see? Asked Alberto. I see that you are a strange bird. You think so? I don't think I'll ever get to understand what it's like being another person. No two people in the whole world are alike. And the woods, they don't seem the same way anymore. They're like a whole universe of wondrous tales. So Alberto is saying now, it is as I suspected. The blue bottle is individualism. It is, for example, Soren Kierkegaard's reaction to the idealism of the Romantics. But it also encompasses another Danish person, who lived at the same time as Kierkegaard, the famous fairy tale writer Hans Christian Andersen. He had the same sharp eye for nature's incredible richness of detail. A philosopher who saw the same thing more than a century earlier was the German Leibniz. He reacted against the idealistic philosophy of Spinoza just as Kierkegaard reacted against Hegel. I hear you, but you sound so funny that I feel like laughing. That's understandable. Just take another sip from the red bottle. Come on, let's sit here on the step. We'll talk a bit about Kierkegaard before we stop for today. Sophie sat uh, on the step beside Alberto. She drank a little from the red bottle and things began to merge together again. They actually merged rather too much. One more Once more, she got the feeling that no differences mattered at all. But she only had to touch the blue bottle to her lips again, and the world about her looked more or less as it did when Alice arrived with the two bottles. How fascinating this analogy is, seriously. It's amazing. But which is true? She never asked exactly. Is it the red bottle or the blue bottle that gives the true picture? Both the red and the blue, Sophie. We cannot say the romantics were wrong in holding that there is only one reality. But maybe they were a little bit narrow in their outlook. But what about the blue bottle? I think Kierkegaard must have taken a few hefty swigs from that one. He certainly had a sharp eye for the significance of the individual. We are more than children of our time. And moreover, every single one of us is a unique individual who only lives once. And Hegel had not made much of that. No, he was more interested in the broad scope of history. This was just what made Kierkegaard so indignant. He thought that both idealism of the Romantics and Hegel's historicism had obscured the individual's responsibility for his own life. Therefore, to Kierkegaard, Hegel and the Romantics, Therefore, to Kierkegaard, Hegel and the Romantics were tarred with the same brush. I can see why he was so mad. Soren Kierkegaard was born in 1813 and was subjected to a very severe upbringing by his father. His religious melancholia was a legacy from this father. That sounds ominous, said Sophie. It was because of this melancholia that he felt obliged to break off his engagement, something the Copenhagen bourgeois did not look kindly on. So from early on, he became an outcast and an object of scorn. However, he gradually learned to give as good as he got. Excuse me. And he became increasingly what Ibsen later on described as an enemy of the people. All because of a broken engagement? No, not only because of that. Towards the end of his life, especially, he became aggressively critical of society. The whole of Europe is on the road to bankruptcy, he said. He believed that he was living in an age utterly devoid of passion and commitment. He was particularly incensed by the vapidness of the established Danish Lutheran Church. Good man. He was merciless in his criticism of what you might call Sunday Christianity, in quotes. Nowadays, we talk of confirmation Christianity. Most kids only get confirmed because of all the presents they get. Yes, you got the point, said Alberto. To Kierkegaard, Christianity was both so overwhelming and so irrational that it had to be an either or. It was not good being rather or to some extent religious. So it's like black and white. You're either with us or you're against us, that kind of stuff. You're either religious or you're not. Because either Jesus rose on Easter Day or he did not. And if he really did rise from the dead, if he really died for our sake, then it is so overwhelming that it must permeate our entire life. Yes, I think I understand, said Sophie. But Kierkegaard saw how both the church and people in general had a non committal approach to religious questions. To Kierkegaard, religion and knowledge were like fire and water. It was not enough to believe that Christianity is true. Having a Christian faith meant following a Christian way of life. What did that have to do with Hegel? You're right. Maybe we started at the wrong end. So I suggest you go into the reverse and start again. That's what Sophie said. So Alberto is starting again. Kierkegaard began his study of theology when he was 17, but he became increasingly absorbed in philosophical questions. When he was 27, he took his master's degree with a dissertation. So this is the topic of the dissertation on the concept of irony. In this work, he did battle with romantic irony and romantics uncommitted play with illusion. So the uncommitted play that the romantics do with illusion. He posited Socratic irony in contrast. So there is a romantic irony and a Socratic irony. Even though Socrates had made use of irony to great effect, it had the purpose of eliciting the fundamental truths about life. Unlike the romantics, Socrates was what Kierkegaard called an existential thinker. That is to say, a thinker who draws his entire existence into his philosophical reflection. So Sophie is a little bit intrigued now. She's asking, so what? That breaking off his engagement in 18 after breaking off his engagement in 1841, Kierkegaard went to Berlin, where he attended Schelling's lectures. So Sophie is asking, did he meet Hegel? No, Hegel had died 10 years earlier, but his ideas were predominant in Berlin and in many parts of Europe. His system was being used as a kind of all-purpose explanation for every type of question. Kierkegaard indicated that the sort of objective truths that Hegelianism was concerned with were totally irrelevant to the personal life of the individual. What kind of truths are relevant then? According to Kierkegaard, rather than searching for the truth with a capital T, it is more important to find the kind of truths that are meaningful to the individual's life. It's important to find the truth for me. He thus sets the individual or each and every man up against the system, in quotes. Kierkegaard thought Hegel had forgotten that he was a man. This is what he wrote about the Hegelian professor. When the ponderous Sir Professor explains the entire mystery of life, he has, in distraction, forgotten his own name. That he is a man, neither more nor less, not a fantastic 3/8 of a paragraph. And what, according to Kierkegaard, is a man? So Alberto is responding. It's not possible to say in general terms. A broad description of human nature or human beings was totally without interest to Kierkegaard. The only important thing was each man's own existence. And you don't experience your own existence behind a desk. It's only when we act, and especially when we make significant choices, that we relate to our own existence. There's a story about Buddha that illustrates what Kierkegaard meant. Sophie is now even more intrigued about Buddha. Yes, since Buddha's philosophy also took man's existence as its starting point. There was once a monk who asked Buddha if he could give a clearer answer to fundamental questions on what the world is and what a man is. Buddha answered by likening the monk to a man who gets pierced by a poisoned arrow. The wounded man would have no theoretical interest in what the arrow was made of, what kind of poison it was dipped in, or which direction it came from. He would most likely want somebody to pull it out and treat the wound, said Sophie. So Alberto is responding. Yes, he would. That would be existentially important to him. Both Buddha and Kierkegaard had a strong sense of only existing for a brief moment. And as I said, then you don't sit down behind a desk and philosophize about the nature of the world's spirit. No, of course not. Kierkegaard also said that truth is subjective. By this, he did not mean that it doesn't matter what we think or believe. He meant that the really important truths are personal. Only these truths are true for me, in quotes. Could you give me an example of a subjective truth? Asked Sophie. So he's elaborating. An important question is, for example, whether Christianity is true. This is not a question one can relate to theoretically or academically. For a person who understands himself in life, it is a question of life and death. It's not something you sit and discuss for discussion's sake. It is something to be approached with the greatest passion and sincerity. So Sophie says, that's understandable. If you fall into water, you have no theoretical interest in whether or not you will drown. It is neither interesting nor uninteresting whether there are alligators in the water. It's a question of life or death. I get it. Thank you very much, said Sophie. So we must therefore distinguish between the philosophical question of whether God exists and the individual's relationship to the same question, a situation in which each and every man is utterly alone. Fundamental questions such as these can only be approached through faith. Things can be known through reason or knowledge. Things we can know through reason or knowledge are, according to Kierkegaard, totally unimportant. Hmm, fascinating. I think you would better explain that. 8 plus 4 is 12. We can be absolutely certain of this. That's an example of the sort of reasoned truth that every philosopher since Descartes had talked about. But do we include it in our daily prayers? Is it something we will lie pondering over when we are dying? Not at all. Truths like those can be both objective and general, but they are nevertheless totally immaterial to each man's existence. What about faith? So Alberto is responding. You can never know whether a person forgives you when you are wrong them. Therefore, it is existentially important to you. It is a question you are intensely concerned with. Neither can you know whether a person loves you. It's something you just have to believe or hope. But these things are more important to you than the fact that the sum of the angles in a triangle is 180 degrees. You don't think about the law of cause and effect or about modes of perception when you are in the middle of your first kiss. I wish some of our rationalists are listening to this, right? They have completely deracinated life and made it exactly about these verifiable truths. Whereas there is an entire universe out there that is more fascinating, that is more about non objective truths. You'd be very odd if you did, right? If you think about all these math when you're doing whatever you're doing. Faith is the most important factor in religious questions. Kierkegaard wrote, if I am capable of grasping God objectively, I do not believe. But precisely because I cannot do this, I must believe. Thank you, sir. Looks like I inherited somehow Kierkegaard's logic without ever reading it. This is the first time I'm reading this also. If I wish to preserve myself in faith, I must constantly be intent upon holding fast the objective uncertainty so as to remain out upon the deep over 70,000 fathoms of water, still preserving my faith. That's heavy stuff. Many had previously tried to prove the existence of God, or at any rate to bring him within the bounds of rationality. But if you content yourself with some such proof or logical argument, you suffer a loss of faith, and with it, a loss of religious passion. Because what matters is not whether Christianity is true, but whether. Just give me 1 second, sir. There's some comment here. Let me know when I should take over the reading. Yeah, probably after this page, sir. Sorry, I didn't see the comment. Many had previously tried to prove the existence of God, or at any rate to bring him within the bounds of rationality. But if you content yourself with some such proof or logical argument, you suffer a loss of faith, and with it a loss of religious passion. Because what matters is not whether Christianity is true, but whether it is true for you. Exactly. The same thought was expressed in the Middle Ages in the maxim, credo quid absurdum. You don't say, said Sophie. It means, I believe because it is irrational. If Christianity had appealed to your reason, our reason, and not to other sides of us, it would not be a question of faith. No, I understand that now, said Sophie. So we have looked at what Kierkegaard meant by existential, what he meant by subjective truth, and with his concept and what his concept of faith was. These three concepts are formulated as a criticism of philosophical tradition in general and of Hegel in particular. But they also embodied a trenchant social criticism. So he's referring to Kierkegaard's social criticism. The individual in modern urban society had become the public in quotes, he said, and the predominant characteristic of the crowd or the masses was all their non-committal talk. Today, we'll probably use the word conformity, that is, when everybody thinks and believes in the same things without having any deeper feeling about it. So Sophie is asking, I wonder what Kierkegaard would have said to Joanna's parents. He was not always kind in his judgments. He had a sharp pen and a bitter sense of irony. For example, he could say things like the crowd is the untruth, or the truth is always in the minority, and that most people had a superficial approach to life. It's one thing to collect Barbie dolls, but it's worse to be one. That brings us to Kierkegaard's theory of what he called the three stages on life's way. Pardon me, says Sophie. Kierkegaard believed that there were three different forms of life. He himself used the term stages. He calls them the aesthetic stage, the ethical stage, and the religious stage. He used the term stage to emphasize that one can live at one of the two lower stages and then suddenly leap to a higher stage. Many people live at the same stage all their life. I bet there's an explanation on the way. I'm anxious to know which stage I am at. All right, Sikshadhangar, you can take over and welcome to the panel, Davji.
Hello, Dauji. Okay, maybe he's busy, sir.
Yeah, no problem. He'll talk when he's ready. No audio.
Oh,
Huh? After you join the panel or before?
No, now it's okay.
No, it's okay.
no, it's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Hello, hi,
Yeah, how are you?
welcome.
Hello, hello, Sikshatan Garu. Hello, Vishagaru.
Hello, hello, Dauji Garu. How are you doing? Was the question, Dauji?
That's okay.
No, I'm doing great.
Cool.
I'm doing
Great,
great.
good.
Exams are over. Only practical is left.
Okay.
So yeah, so looking
Why
forward to
don't
it.
you'll have to come and give us the good news of your successful completion.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Shikshadan garu, go ahead, sir.
All right, sir. So I'll take a bit step back to the previous paragraph and start from there, sir.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Kierkegaard believed that there were three forms of life. That's, I think, a
y-
good starting point. Yeah.
yeah. So Alberto was answering. Kierkegaard believed that there were three different forms of life. He believed he himself used the term stages. He calls them the aesthetic stage, the ethical stage, and the religious stage. He used he used the term stage to emphasize that one can live at one of the two lower stages and then suddenly leap to a higher stage. Many people live at the same stage all their life. Sophie's asking, I bet there's an explanation on the way. I'm anxious to know which stage I'm at. Alberto says, he who lives at the aesthetic stage lives for the moment and grasps every opportunity of enjoyment. Good is whatever is beautiful, satisfying, or pleasant. This person lives wholly in the world of the senses and is a slave to his own desires and moods. Everything that is boring is bad. Yes, thanks. I think I know that attitude, said Sophie. Then Alberto, the typical romantic is thus also the typical aesthete. Since there is more to it, since there is more to it than pure sensory enjoyment. A person who has reflective approach to reality, or for that matter, to his art or the philosophy he or she is engaged in, is living at the aesthetic stage. It is even possible to have an aesthetic or reflective attitude to sorrow and suffering, in which case vanity has taken over. Ibsen's Peer Gynt is the portrait of a typical aesthete. I think I see what you mean. Do you know do you know anyone like that? Not completely, but I think maybe it sounds a little like the major. Maybe so, Sophie. Although that was another example of his rather sickly romantic irony. You should wash your mouth out. What? Asked Sophie. All right, it wasn't your fault. Keep going then, said Sophie. A person who lives at the aesthetic stage can easily experience angst or a sense of dread and a feeling of emptiness. If this happens, there is also hope. According to Kierkegaard, angst is almost positive. It is an expression of the fact that the individual is in an existential situation and can now elect to make the great leap to a higher stage. But it either happens or it doesn't. It doesn't help to be on the verge of making the leap if you don't do it, if you don't do it completely. It is a matter of either or. But nobody can do it for you. It is your own choice. It's a little like deciding to quit drinking or doing drugs, said Sophie. Then Alberto said, yes, it could be like that. Kierkegaard's description of this category of decision can be somewhat reminiscent of Socrates' view that all true insight comes from within. The choice that leads a person to leap from an aesthetic approach to an ethical or religious approach must come from within. Ibsen depicts this in Peer Gynt. Another masterly description of how existential choice springs from inner need and despair can be found in Dostoevsky's great novel Crime and Punishment. Then Sophie says, the best you can do is choose a different form of life. So then Alberto says, and so perhaps you will begin to live at the ethical stage. This is characterized by seriousness and consistency of moral choices. This approach is not unlike Kant's ethics of duty. You try to live by the law of morals. Kierkegaard, like Kant, drew attention first and foremost to human temperament. The important thing is not what you may think is precisely right or wrong. What matters is that you choose to have an opinion at all on what is right or wrong. The aesthete's only concern is whether something is fun or boring. Isn't there a risk of becoming too serious living like that? Asked Sophie. Decidedly, Kierkegaard never claimed that the ethical stage was satisfactory. Even a dutiful person will eventually get tired of always being dedicated and meticulous. Lots of people experience that sort of fatigue reaction late in life. Some relapse into the reflective life of their aesthetic stage, but others make a new leap to the religious stage. They take the jump into the abyss of faith's 70,000 fathoms. They choose faith in preference to aesthetic pleasure and a reason's call of duty. And although it can be terrible to jump into the open arms of the living God, as Kierkegaard put it, it is the only path to redemption. Christianity, you mean? Said Sophie. Yes, because to Kierkegaard, the religious stage was Christianity. But he also became significant to non-Christian thinkers. Existentialism, inspired by the Danish philosopher, flourished widely in the 20th century. Sophie glanced at her watch. It's nearly 7. I have to run. Mom will be frantic. She waved to the philosopher and ran down to the boat. So there ends our chapter of Kierkegaard.
Sounds good, sir. This is actually quite a heavy chapter, frankly.
Yes, there is a lot to ponder upon.
Totally.
Especially the red bottle and the blue bottle. That was very intriguing, sir.
Yeah. I
So,
only relate to this subchapter more than probably many of the others.
yes, sir, yes.
Because it gives a good framework to explain all things.
Mm,
Because he's really not. I mean, while he had his theory of life towards the end, these 3 stages and going from A to B, whatever it is.
mm,
The initial parts where he was questioning the objectivity and the subjectivity and all that is a good framework to use to explain,
right,
right?
sir. Mm,
What you can deduce and what you cannot.
right, sir.
So yeah, next is Marx. So we're not going to do Marx today. Marx is too,
Okay, sir.
Marx is
So,
contentious. Yeah.
So I'm thinking I have to uh, read once again these
Yeah,
chapters.
yeah,
So it's a bit heavy.
yeah. I think it's a good idea. What we need
Yeah.
is I haven't looked if there is any AI program that summarizes Sophie's world and
Hmm.
sort of gives a tabular sort of rendering of all the ideas that are presented, because there are a huge number of concepts that are just
Yes,
compiled in
sir.
a small book, basically.
Yes, and also there are references from non-Christian beliefs as well.
True. But it
So
starts with Buddhism. Pay close attention.
yeah, yes, sir.
That's the It's the marketing of Buddhism to the West that made it what it is.
Hmm.
Yeah. A lot of it was
Yes,
marketed by the Eastern countries like Japan, China, and all this. So
yes, yes, sir.
didn't quite come from India.
Asians.
Mm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I get it, sir. I get it.
Mostly so India is yoga and China and Japan are Buddhism, according from the Western viewpoint. So
Hmm. Yes, sir. I think I don't want to make a comment about Westerners, but
no, that's okay. Look, at the end of the day, you are the
yeah,
product of what you are exposed to, right?
yes.
You don't have
What I'm trying, yeah, what I think is Westerners think in a linear fashion. They have uh, they think in straight lines, I guess.
Yeah, no, the reason for that is they are too consumed by the objective nature of life rather than the subjective.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the
I think
partly
all
because of
the
the separation of church and state and the dogma and all that. They don't have this
yeah,
fluid
yeah, sir.
approach that India has.
Yeah, I think the Westerners need a bit of red juice.
Nah. Yeah, the only problem is the red juice has been captured by the church for a long time back. So unfortunately, there is a Kool-Aid, there's
Ca-
a pink,
ca-
fluorescent pink.
captured,
People now.
captured, and has been kept hidden from
Yeah,
human sight.
totally. Dawji is
Yeah,
silent awfully. Dawji, go ahead, sir.
Hmm. I'm outside, so I will not speak much, but
Hmm.
it's a great chapter, as always. And Kierkegaard thought were good, but I don't agree about the stages thing, like
Yeah, yeah. That's
aesthetic,
his own.
ethical, and the religious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's his own framework. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and also there is a reference, Daoji, about
Hmm.
his upbringing,
Hmm.
as well. Right, sir? About
yeah, yeah.
his father being maybe an Orthodox Christian.
Very strict and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So there's a rebellious streak that develops, right, when somebody is like that.
Mm.
Hmm.
So it takes
The
some
kind
time
of
to
the,
stabilize.
the the kind of statements that
That time they were thinking about only themselves. Like sometime I think about the philosophers of the West. The emphasis was more on myself, like yourself, I would say.
Correct.
Not society, not system, not big theory. Like it was only you, how you feel, how you should do, how you should go. Like in system, how should you like work? System may be perfect, but humans are not system. That was his quote. Huh?
Correct.
System may be perfect, but humans are not system. So that's a good way to think it. Like, but I don't agree with all the stages you put. But yeah, but great theory. I
Yeah,
also want to
definitely.
give one of my theories to the world. But firstly, I need to check that it's not borrowed from somebody else.
Correct. Yeah, you need to do some fact finding / literature survey.
Yeah.
Huh.
Once I thought that the Maya, na,
Mm,
Advaita philosophy. I was thinking about that, and I came up with one theory. Okay,
mm.
to counter that. Then I searched it in Google. Okay, and then I found out there is already somebody else who said that. I was like, that was my theory now.
Correct.
But yeah, so it was just a great chapter. Sorry for being late.
No, it's all good. It's all good. So yeah, unless you have something else to say, we'll close, sir. We'll close for today. Huh?
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay. See you next week.
Uh, yeah. Next week you take care. Okay, and let us know
Uh,
when your practicals are, and best of luck.
uh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Best of luck, Dauji.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, sir. Shardin Garu, we'll also
Yes, sir.
call it.
Right, sir.
Yeah. More things to think about for everybody,
Yes.
including us.
More things to unravel in the
More
upcoming
in
chapters.
your mind. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So for everybody who is listening, who will listen in the future, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments under the video, and I'll try to answer them. We'll try to answer them as much as we can. Have a wonderful week. Thank you.